you, Ben, for that lovely introduction. Really glad to be here, especially after the caffeine hit, because I have a lot of slides. I'm going to fly through them as quickly as I can. So starting at the beginning, what is Nuxio? Nuxio is an open source asset management platform, and the key word here being platform, in the sense that it's not a one-size-fits-all out-of-the-box solution. It is meant for developers like yourselves to build content-centric applications. We provide components, we provide the tools for you to assemble the applications that you need. These can range from digital asset management solutions to more traditional document management, to knowledge management, etc. And what we do basically is we provide a set of services on top of the documents that you store. And this was built from the beginning to be able to leverage the cloud to scale. Although most of our customers do host on-premise. So at the core of Nuxio is a repository of documents. And when I say document, I'm not talking about just binary files. So a document is structured content. You can imagine like a JSON object. It has fields, and it can have 0 or n blobs associated as well. And the way you define the structure for your document is using schemas and facets. And what we provide, again, is basically a backend for you to store this information. And we provide services like security policies. You can start workflows on your documents. We provide conversion services. We provide preview services. We have a very nice, powerful search backend powered by Elasticsearch. We have audit. So the fact that we are a platform relies on our core runtime. Our core runtime is based on the OSGI model. Actually also borrow some stuff from Equinox. So everything in the platform is a bundle. So you can choose and pick the bits and pieces that you want to use to deploy just those. And relying on some similarities to Equinox, we have components with well-defined APIs. And these components can themselves declare extension points. So you can make contributions to them. So everything in the platform is pluggable across all the layers of the platform. From the lower layers, you can customize, you can decide which storage you want to use for your files, for your data, etc. At the services, you can switch implementation of the services, and even at the UI level. So even our current UI, which is built with JSF2, is very pluggable. And we need it to be pluggable because, like I said, we have this plugin model, and every plugin can make contributions to the UI. So they can add a button here, they can remove this button, and people also need to define layouts for their own document types. So we built it on top of a meta model of layouts, where a layout is basically just a list of widgets with widget types, and these have modes. It can be a view mode, an edit mode. And we did this not only for these form layouts, but also for content views, which are basically tables. You can select columns, and also for actions and categories, which give us placeholder in the UI, and the plugin can contribute a new button to it, can add a new menu entry, etc. And so this pluggability is essential for what we sell, because Nuxio is open source, completely open source, not a dual license, and we sell customization as a service and support. And the tool we have is Nuxio Studio, is a software as a service that allows you to do anything you want in terms of customization of Nuxio. You can brand your application, you can create document types, etc. And the cool thing is that we actually store this customization in a different format from the runtime format, so you can easily switch between target platforms, and it will build the contributions that you need to customize the project. So summing up, just focusing on the UI, which is what I'm here to tell you about, we have this meta model that is managed by Studio, and then it's deployed in the platform. And at runtime, we will build the JSF componentry and ultimately produce the HTML that we need to build the UI. So this has served us very well. It's very simple. It's configurable. It's pluggable. The thing is that we have more and more customers who really just want to build their own application. I mean, we have a well-defined REST API. We have a good set of clients, and people just want to use these to build their applications. And this would mean that they would be stepping out of our meta model and would be on their own. They wouldn't have support. And these guys, they mostly want to leverage JavaScript framework. They want to leverage HTML, CSS. So we are in the business of providing solutions for developers to build content-centric applications. So we started to see how we could adjust our model to fit these new scenarios that we were seeing more and more. So what we wanted to do was to still have this notion of our layouts with widgets, widget types, etc. But we wanted to have elements that developers could use with any framework they wanted to build their applications. And these elements, these UI elements, would know how to talk to our REST APIs, would be aware of this layout model, and would make it very easy for people to build these applications. So naturally, we were looking for the same components we had before with JSF, server-side, but something that people could use on the client side or even a hybrid mobile application. And that naturally led us to web components. Come on, it's components for the web. It's exactly what we're looking for. And summing up web components, I'm not going to give a thorough explanation of this. It's a set of standards that ultimately, finally allows you to extend vocabulary of HTML. So you finally can create your custom elements, HTML. You have tags, and you can augment HTML to whatever you need it to do. The cool thing about HTML is that you get the free parser, which is the browser. Everyone knows how to work with HTML, so it just made sense with us. So we went looking for, okay, this is what we really want to do. How do we get started? And when we're doing so, we run into Polymer, which is a library started by some folks at Google, whose goal was to make it easy for us to build these web components. And it also, at the time, sheltered us from the changes in the specs. The polyfills have since been moved to a different project, but it allowed us to focus on what we wanted to do, which was build web components. And the good thing is that there was no magic with Polymer, especially starting from version 0.8. It was really simple. It just removed some boilerplate, added some elegance, and brought in some nice things like observers and data binding, and made it very easy for us to build elements in a very declarative way. Everyone really appreciated simplicity, so we knew this is what we wanted to use to build these elements. We started by building non-visual elements, which might be weird for those who haven't worked with Polymer, but it's actually a trend that the Polymer project started with the iron elements. And this, combined with the fact that we have data binding, makes it very easy for you to build applications with almost no JavaScript, so very declarative applications. Since these data elements allow you to use two-way binding to interact with our APIs and get the data ready, and then just bind this to something from paper elements, it's very easy to build simple applications, just very declarative, very easy to work with. So what we did at Nuxio is still mostly a Java shop. We still have the JSF UI. Most of our stuff is built in Java. We started to slowly learning and doing prototypes. We built prototypes around some new APIs, about workflow APIs, stuff like that. And at some point, we said, okay, so we're trying to sell this idea that we're building elements that people can use to build their own UIs. So I guess we should just eat our own dog food and try to use these elements in our own UI. So we decided to try and integrate these elements that we were building into the current JSF UI. And we did that for permission screen. We did from time-off request management that we needed. And we even built a very cool syntax that allows you to build these dashboards, all with Polymer. And the cool thing about using Polymer and web components, more generically, that it's so easy to integrate because it's HTML. And even in JSF, you just need to drop the tag there, and it works. Interrupt is there for free. So very easy. And of course, once we had these elements, we wanted to step it up a notch, and we said, okay, so why not just rewrite the UI that we have? Why not remove JSF and build a new one? And that's what we started to do, to try to reboot the user experience, to reboot the technical stack, and build a whole new UI using these elements, and step by step, start creating a good catalog of UI elements that people could use to build their own application, which was the initial goal. When we set out to do this, Polymer was, and I guess it's still not, built to be an application framework. Polymer was meant to be a library to make it easy for you to build your web components, not an application framework. So we decided to not bring in any other external framework to see how much we could leverage the DOM as a framework. And the fact is that even looking at HTML today and the DOM, you can think of an element as a component because it has a well-defined API. It has a declarative nature. You can interact with its attributes, its properties. You can call methods on them, and they can even send events. So you have data in, data out. It's very easy to interact with them, and it has a declarative syntax and the fastest parsers in the world, which are the browsers. So it just made sense. And even doing a simple comparison with JSF, everything seemed to be in there. We had XHTML on one end, HTML on the other. We had the JSF component tree, document object model. So everything was there, ready to go. We just needed to basically port our framework from the server side to the client side. Building the structure of the application was easy. Polymer had this great library of elements, material design elements called paper elements, and third-party vendors started to coming up with their own elements as well. But when you start building an application with Polymer, again, Polymer is not or was not an application framework. Most immediate questions were, okay, data flow. So two-way binding is really cool. Everyone who has played with binding knows it's cool. But once you start trying to grow an application around it, it gets really messy to understand who is triggering these changes, etc. So we tried to adopt a pattern very similar to the Flux that is very trendy, where data just propagates downwards. We try to have a data store, a mediator, data host who stores the main data, and then using one-way binding, we propagate this data downwards. And when one of the children needs its data to be updated, it just triggers an event and it refetches the data to keep it simple. Then the other problem we ran into right from the start was, okay, but it is very different from building an element for my application, from building an element that other people can use in their applications, because you need to ensure property coupling. So if you want to have like a page element where you want to have a property visible that needs to be set to true for it to be displayed, it's really annoying because people just deploy that and it's invisible by default and it doesn't make sense. And just decoupling these elements was tricky. And even basic stuff at the time where we started, there was no internationalization solution, there was no routing, especially reverse routing solution for Polymer. So we worked our way around that by building these behaviors, very easy to mix in your elements, and step by step we built the application. Once we had the basic application laid down, so we had the web UI, we wanted to see, okay, but our previous JSF UI was customizable and it was pluggable. How much of that can we bring in without making this too confusing to handle? And we decided to start with the customization. By customization, I mean being able to override certain bits of the UI to make it your own. And the problem with Polymer is that for you to deploy an application in production, you have to vulcanize the whole thing. It means like basically building this big bundle that you deploy. So it's not easy to allow people just to override small bits of the UI. And what we did, and it's kind of a pattern that's also the new Polymer applications are doing, is we excluded some of these files from vulcanization. They call them fragments nowadays. And we also did lazy imports, meaning that, for example, all our main pages like home, the browser, etc., are single elements that are loaded on demand. What this allows us to do is allow the user to, if they want to override this HTML file, to have a complete control of the look and feel of that particular page. And also, since it's loaded on demand, we can control when data is requested. Because that was another of the challenges working with Polymer, is many elements were already attached to the DOM, just not visible. So it is very easy for you to end up with an application that is doing dozens of requests for elements that are not even visible. And this kind of solved us both problems. Next problem that we wanted to address was customization of the document layouts. Like I said before, we had this meta model and we have a layout registry. And for this, we decided to keep it simple. We wanted people to leverage HTML, so let's just make these layouts HTML elements. So for each document type, we have a different set of elements. So just by convention, people can drop in a new Nuxio note view layout to customize what a note document looks like. And we did this for edit, for view. So we had the same level of configuration that we had in JSF. We were just missing the meta model. We wanted to address this, and we, again, like I said, we sell Studio solution that we sell to customize. So we wanted to build a designer to allow you to build these layouts visually and also using HTML. And the cool thing of using HTML is, again, it's very easy to parse. And even the Polymer team had some very good tooling that allowed us to parse HTML and to understand and to extract a meta model. So in the end, we were not losing anything compared to the meta model that we had with JSF, because we can parse the HTML, we can know what widgets are being used, widgets in this case being elements, we can know what properties these fields in these widgets are bound to, so we can validate that this property exists in a document of that type. So we had everything in place to, just leveraging HTML, allow you to build the layouts while still being able to validate and hopefully help you migrate to newer versions. And of course, we had to build a visual editor because it was so easy, because we can parse stuff, it's HTML, we can just do a live preview, you drag stuff around, and it was definitely an improvement compared to the JSF UI that we had before. The last question that we had to address was incremental layouts. Because one thing is for you to override bits and pieces in the UI, But when you have a framework which is as pluggable as ours, where you have plugins that can add stuff to the UI, can remove stuff, can reorder stuff, overriding is not enough because you cannot control the order of these add-ons. So we needed a solution to do incremental layouts. And we came up with Nuxio slots. The naming is not a coincidence. It does match the V1 spec slots. The spec of slots basically allows you to declare slots in an element with an ID. And then when you use that element, you can contribute content to that ID. But in our particular case, we needed more control. We needed to be able to disable elements that were already there. So a plugin can disable a button that another plugin added. We might want to be able to control the order of these add-ons. So we introduced our own notion of slots and contents with filter and a well-defined context. And of course, we had to build something visual to allow our developers to do that. So we built a UI editor that allows people to customize the UI. In the end, we were pretty happy with the results. We just released the 1.0 version at the end of last month. I think we ended up with something that's very, very simple to understand. People can use this as an example to build their own applications in Nuxio. It is reusable. We're growing our library of elements. It is configurable and as pluggable as the UI we had before. Next steps for us are migration to Polymer 2. We want to work on a better UI library. We want to improve packaging to make loading faster. And we want to start working on other applications and better IDE and browser integration. Thank you. Sorry for the long presentation. That's it.
Okay, over to you people. Any questions that you have for Nelson? Evidently not enough coffee. Coffee break then. Anything at all, anyone that people would be interested in finding out a bit more about? Okay, yeah, let's go to that.
Hey, I think it's really cool that you've kind of incorporated the unidirectional data flow from Flux instead of like a two-way data binding model. What I'm more interested in is, do you still incorporate server-side rendering along with client-side?
No, we do not do any server-side rendering at this point. It's all client-side rendering. Yeah.
Okay, so if you have a client which maybe wants to use your framework to serve content to a country where the users might not have the best devices to render on their devices, how do you solve that problem?
We don't, but it is a fair question. At this moment, Nuxio is meant for you to manage your assets, not directly serve them from Nuxio, not a CDN. So it's not a big problem, but it is something we want to address. But at this point in time, there was no obvious solution for server-side rendering with Polymer elements. And especially being a JVM shop, was not easy to come up with a solution. But if there's something around, we'll for sure look into that. Again, we want to improve the loading, and that could be one of the aspects that we could use. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
There's another question up front somewhere.
Why Polymer and web components? It sounded like you had to build a lot yourselves over an established framework that might have given you more, leaning more on the community. And related to that, how have you found the Polymer community?
That's a very good question. So we took basically a very bottom-up approach. Like I said, we wanted to try to get into the framework wars because Nuxio platform, most of our customers do their own hosting. They host this on-premise, and we have a 3-year maintenance window for long-term service versions. So it's kind of challenging to be able to bet on a horse that will be the winning horse for the next 3 years. So we wanted to stay away from the framework wars and come up with something that hopefully would be framework agnostic. And for us, web components was the choice. The fact that we used Polymer as an application framework, because we could have built the elements with Polymer, but use a framework to build the UI, was a choice to be sure we were not leveraging stuff the framework gave us without knowing. because it's very easy for you to rely on dependency injection because stuff just gets injected there. We wanted to be sure we were not taking advantage of stuff that was not provided by the platform, so that hopefully people can take these elements and use them with React as leaf nodes, could use them instead of Angular directives. I mean, that is the vision. I'm not saying we're there yet because I think there's a lot of work to do in terms of interrupt with these web components, but that's the vision. You had a second question, sorry, was?
What was the Polymer community like?
Polymer, I mean, have no concerns with the Polymer community. We went to the summit in Amsterdam. Again, I think Polymer community was pretty decent. Kind of the other ones weren't so decent to Polymer, if that makes sense, because React fans are React fans. I mean, it would be nice if people try to see things more objectively, because there's no reason to be fighting. Polymer is just meant for you to be able to build web components. You can use these web components with any framework you want. And if we all work towards that, we can make the browser evolve, which I think is the ultimate goal. If we keep coming up with solutions to go around problems the browsers have, we'll never have the browsers that we need. I mean, you were doing virtual DOM to optimize the rendering. We're doing these tricks, but by leveraging web components, we're trying to push the browsers and push the browsers platform forward. And that rang a bell with us, and it just made sense. So we went with that.
Anything else? Yes. Really tricky place for me to get to, so thanks for that.
Did you have any difficulty using Polymer with any non-Polymer tooling, things like JavaScript, module bundlers, things like Webpack?
We're not using Webpack at all. We did have to fight. At some point, we had to give up on the Shadow DOM because we were using some third-party JavaScript libraries like Alloy for the rich text editor. Unfortunately, we still have some Select 2 there, which requires jQuery. So yeah, we still had to jump through some hoops to get Polymer to play nicely. But the thing is that the Polymer is going the right direction, and our hope is to remove these and make it work. Most of the problems we had were introduced by Shadow DOM. Everything else just kind of worked out of the box without any issues.